He is so stupid. Why did he do that? I don't agree to use the military.
Breaking news. General Mark just refused to carry out Trump's order. Multiple sources confirm Trump personally pressured General Mark to deploy active duty troops into Los Angeles, Chicago, and other so-called sanctuary cities for sweeping military-style raids. If that order had gone through, America would have witnessed something unprecedented in peacetime. Soldiers stationed at elementary school gates, checking children's IDs, military vehicles surrounding immigrant families' homes in the dead of night, everyday neighborhoods turned into militarized lockdown zones, all because someone doesn't look American enough. But this time, someone stood in the way. Since the Militia Act of 1878, the U.S. has had a hard rule. The military cannot be used against its own people. This week, a general stood up and defended that line for all of us. Whatever your political views, one thing is clear. When soldiers refuse unlawful orders, they're not betraying their country. They're protecting all of us from being dragged into a war mindset. They are the last line of defense for American democracy. When a president tries to overstep, does the military have a duty to say no? If that day ever comes, do you want our soldiers to obey unchecked power or to defend democracy itself? Comment below, because what happens next defines what kind of country we really are.
Hi guys, this is Tiana and you're welcome to Tiana's React. So Americans are in shock right now. Trump summoned over 800 top generals, gave out commands that the US Constitution itself forbids. Why would the leader tell his own military to act against citizens and to use American soil as a training ground? Why give unlawful orders when the Constitution clearly states that the military serves the people and not politics? The generals have made it clear that they will defend the law, not to break it. Americans' military just reminded everyone who they really serve. Well, let's watch their stand on this.
We are back with Maryland Governor Wes Moore on a very busy news night. There's so much I wanted to ask you about, and you gave that amazing speech this morning in Maryland. The government shut down, but yesterday also, Trump and Hegseth gave what I thought was a bizarre, politicized event. They did a bizarre and politicized event in front of 4, 3, 2, 1-star members of the U.S. military. You were a veteran yourself. And there are a couple things that struck me. They talked about fighting a war from within. They talked about these silly rules of engagement. When you're in the military, and you know this better than I do, but I've worked with a member of they serve the commander in chief. They report to him. They do what he orders. And I just wonder if we're in just a different moment where there should be some questioning. Or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was really disheartening. I received a text from a person who I served with before, and he said to me, he said, you know, it's normal to disagree with the commander in chief. He said, but I don't know if it's normal to be embarrassed by him. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I'm embarrassed. You know, and when we take the oath, we take the oath that we are going to follow the Constitution of the United States of America, and we will follow the lawful orders of the commander-in-chief. It's the same thing, and it's the same very humble responsibility that I take as the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. That I know the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard, they move on the command of the commander-in-chief, that I'm giving them lawful orders. But I also think there's a confidence amongst the members of the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard is that I would only ever give lawful orders. And that's the struggle that I think for a lot of members of the military, they're figuring right now. We will follow the commands of our commander-in-chief. That's the oath that he took. When they're lawful. And I think there's a lot of people who right now, when they heard the words from the commander-in-chief yesterday about talking about using American cities as training grounds, they're not receiving lawful orders. In fact, they're receiving orders that are in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and of U.S. law. And so this is what is making this moment so tricky. It's not just the fact that, you know, hearing Pete Hegseth, ridicule people about merit is really rich when he is the most unqualified Secretary of Defense this country's ever seen. But it's past that. It's that we are hearing from our commander-in-chief about instructions that he is giving to the members of our military that are not just nonsensical, they're unlawful. And that puts the members of our military in a really complicated situation.
What can they do?
They don't have to follow them. We have to follow lawful orders. We follow the instructions of our commander-in-chief. We follow the Constitution of the United States of America. But I cannot stress enough that word lawful matters. And in fact, we are told you do not have to follow unlawful orders. And so I think this becomes a really challenging moment for the members of our military when you usually have the ability to trust that the orders that you are getting
The Donald Trump commander-in-chief train is off the tracks, and it begs the question, at some point, will generals refuse his unlawful orders to wage war against the so-called enemy within? A top-ranking Democrat and former Army paratrooper just floated that very idea, something that could turn into a tremendous problem for Trump like the world has never seen before, believe me, and I have it all for you next. Let's begin with Trump's own words. Just 2 days ago, he delivered a pretext to the generals. He is well known for using pretext as a persuasion tactic. He sells his batshit crazy ideas by wrapping them in a candy coating that feels digestible right before he makes you gag on a jawbreaker. Have a listen to his pretext for turning the military into Trump's urban strike force.
San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
It is well known that Hitler often used enemy from within propaganda to stir division and rally his supporters against his made-up enemies. So this is crazy talk, right? Congresswoman Madeleine Dean definitely thinks so. Watch as she brutally confronts Mike Johnson over what Trump said. And on the other side, can and will generals disobey his orders?
The president is unhinged. He is unwell. What are you doing?
On your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals? That is so dangerous. You know I serve on foreign affairs and appropriations. It's the collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing. You have a president who is unwell.
And here's Governor Wes Moore for a deep dive into Trump's unlawful orders and the unique opportunity that generals have to stop him in his bone-spurred tracks.
Fighting a war from within. They talked about these silly rules of engagement. When you're in the military, and you know this better than I do, but I've worked with a member of they serve the commander in chief. They report to him. They do what he orders. And I just wonder if we're in just a different moment where there should be some questioning. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was really disheartening. I received a text from a person who I served with before, and he said to me, he said, you know, it's normal to disagree with the commander in chief. He said, but I don't know if it's normal to be embarrassed by him. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm embarrassed. You know, and when we take the oath, we take the oath that we are going to follow the Constitution of the United States of America, and we will follow the lawful orders of the commander-in-chief. It's the same thing, and it's the same very humble responsibility that I take as the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. That I know the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard, they move on the command of the commander-in-chief, that I'm giving them lawful orders. But I also think there's a confidence amongst the members of the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard is that I would only ever give lawful orders. And that's the struggle that I think for a lot of members of the military, they're figuring right now. We will follow the commands of our commander-in-chief. That's the oath that we took. When they're lawful. And I think there's a lot of people who right now, when they heard the words from the commander-in-chief yesterday about talking about using American cities as training grounds,
My name is Captain Dylan Blaha, and this message is for all U.S. military service members, especially every general and admiral meeting with Pete Hegseth on Tuesday. I'm a 13-year U.S. Army veteran who served in Afghanistan and wrote war plans while stationed at U.S. Army Europe. This morning, Donald Trump directed Pete Hegseth to deploy the U.S. military to Portland, Oregon. This is the latest illegal attempt to normalize the use of the military in U.S. cities. He authorized the military to use, quote, full force. This is authoritarianism. This is fascism. The U.S. military is not a law enforcement force, and all federalized service members must abide by the Posse Comitatus Act. All members of the United States military must disobey illegal orders. I was just following orders is not a valid defense against war crimes. Grow a spine and stand up for your fellow Americans. Otherwise, you are complicit in this fascist takeover. We're running out of time.
All right. It's about 10:15 p.m. Is it Sunday? Yeah. Sunday. Raven and I have been having a very spirited discussion over the course of the last hour or so. And we've been talking about Hegseth's speech to the military from this past, I think it was Tuesday, Donald Trump's speech to the military from this past Tuesday. And both of them just bloviating unimaginable amounts of bullshit to the men and women who they were speaking to, the 800 senior most leaders of all of the branches of government outside of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Military.
In the military, yeah. And I guess it'd be accurate to say that we've been discussing what the practical implications of those speeches will be.
Yes.
In one sense. Okay.
The battlefield is going to be violence.
Yeah. Well, so let me put it this way. My overall, and again, I could be totally wrong on this. My overall sense or belief or whatever you want to call it that I'm fucking clinging to for dear life is that just overall, I do not believe that active duty members of the United States military will shoot and kill unarmed Americans on U.S. soil. Raven disagrees with me within certain parameters and in certain contexts. Right?
I do.
Yeah.
Because those are kids. Those
So,
are children.
yeah. And one of the main points that she's making is that, you know, despite the amount of training that new recruits receive, they tend to be 18, 19-year-old young people, you know, basically kids.
Who are taught to follow orders.
Who are taught to follow orders, and depending on what branch of the military they're in, you know, they're taught to kill. They are taught to kill the enemy, period. And they are also taught that they are not the ones who define who the enemy is. That is left to people higher up the chain of command. And I know that there are a lot of creators on here with military experience and intelligence experience and things along those lines. And first of all, it's fucking insane that we're even having to have this conversation in October of 2025, but we are, because we have a 5-time draft dodger and an alcoholic philanderer in charge of the world's greatest military, and they're saying that it's more likely that members of the United States military are going to be deployed inside of American cities than deployed overseas. So we have a fat rapist, convicted felon, and an alcoholic rapist cheater in charge of alleged, in charge of the world's greatest military, threatening to use that military to murder American citizens, civilians in American cities. And I mean, you know, the bottom line question to me is, will members of the military follow an order from Donald Trump to shoot and kill unarmed American citizens?
We're the enemy from within.
Because as Donald Trump said during his speech to the military, people on the left like me and like Raven are the enemy within. So would the United States military follow an order to shoot me in the head, or the same thing with Raven?
And everyone else.
And everyone else. So, and again, it's just like, what the fuck, man? It's a Sunday night. It's almost 10:30, and we're having this legitimate conversation about this topic. This is insane. This is completely insane. So anybody, current, former military, please let me know what you think in the comments. Anybody who's worked at DOD or National Guard or in intelligence services, you know, and you know, because it's like my part of one of my follow-ups to this is, it's like, I think there are like 2 million total active duty members of the United States military, 2 or 2.2, something like that, but they're spread out all over the globe. Assume that they are all back here in the United States. 2.2 million people is not enough to occupy and hold a nation of 340 million people that has 420 million firearms. That sentence seems objectively accurate to me. Am I stupid in making that statement? I should preface everything in this video by saying I've never served in the military in any way, shape, or form. Neither has Raven, to the best of my understanding. Right, honey?
I never have, but I know what I'm reading.
Yeah. And so I'll just say flat out that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm kind of speaking from concepts of hope and math. But, you know, Raven's been doing some deep dives and a lot of reading this evening and is reading a lot of things that are concerning her greatly. Not the least of which is Trump's use of language over recent weeks and how it seems to be mirroring, not explicitly, but at least conceptually, language that was used by the ruling party in Rwanda in the early 90s before explicitly giving half the country a cue and permission to slaughter the other half of the country with machetes. And the language has definitely been ramping up in incredibly concerning ways from Trump and from Pete Hegseth and from J.D. Vance and Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski, Kristi Noem's little butt boy, and, you know, Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and all of these other incompetent fucking hacks who couldn't get laid in high school, so now they're taking out all of their bullshit on us with stuff like this. But that's neither here nor there. If ordered to shoot and kill unarmed American citizens, civilians, would members of the United States military follow that order? If so, under what circumstances? If not, under what circumstances? Is it going to come down to each member trying to determine whether or not that order is legal? Or you know, and how many members of the United States military are just anti-vax, COVID hoaxer, super MAGA fuck nuggets who can't wait on their own to start shooting members of Antifa who have stormed Portland, Oregon, and now occupy the entire city. You know, we're all scared to death, and that's exactly what these assholes want. They want us to be scared. They want us to be scared. They want us to be filled with doubt. They want us to be thinking all kinds of things and being afraid to do anything, being afraid to speak out, being afraid to put our heads up above whatever foxhole we're in. They want us to be afraid. And can you imagine being afraid of Donald Trump or Stephen Miller or J.D. Vance? These weak, impotent little men. They can all go fuck themselves. But my question stands. What's the military going to do if they get that order? Let me know.
Does not own the military. So if you saw him speak at Fort Bragg, they had to vet everybody that stood behind him to make sure they had the right political leanings to get up there. And then if you watch the speech, there are a ton of them who aren't even clapping and cheering for him at the points that he probably wanted them to. There are some broken eggs, right? Every unit at the 82nd was ordered to attend, just like any other president. So when you see these pictures of him in front of all of these, you know, massive formations, they had to be there. When a president arrives, everybody has to show, okay? He does not own the military. That was a staged event. There are people in the military who support him, absolutely. But you even had commanders at Bragg saying this is a breach of normal military protocol, where especially him bringing on, you know, vendors to sell MAGA shit, okay, at a military event, which has never been done before, okay? But he doesn't really care about those lines, and nothing will probably happen to him. But when we talk about the fact that he does not own the military, let's go back to a couple other things, right? 70% of veterans, all veterans, are opposing this military parade for him on June 14th, okay? This is from, you know, a group of people.
We have the most amazing military in the world, and the leadership of our amazing military, we're all gathered together, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth were expecting rousing applause and standing ovations from our nation's generals, and they were met with silence. It was a silence of the generals. And the generals knew that what Trump was saying was wrong. We do not deploy American forces against Americans in our cities. Our military is not to be used for domestic law enforcement. It is not trained to do that, and our generals simply sat there silently. It's also illegal for Donald Trump to order U.S. troops against Americans in American cities. A federal judge has said so. We expect the appellate courts and even the Supreme Court to uphold that ruling.
Today, exactly how will these things be implemented?
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. General, I wonder how you received Pete Hegseth's speech yesterday.
Well, I thought a lot of it was sort of boiled over the rhetoric that we've been talking about in the military for decades. Lethality, war fighting, focus on the mission, more training and maintenance, less paperwork, all that. It was good. I liked it. It was a great performance in that respect. But when he talks about changing the standards, not following rules of engagement, just being out there killing, remember that the U.S. military overseas often has to conduct operations in the presence of civilian populations. You can't just kill willy-nilly. You have to have rules of engagement. They have to be followed and enforced. Otherwise, you're destroying the very effort you're making to resolve whatever the issue is that the government sent you in there for, whether it was Iraq and trying to get rid of the terrorists or whatever. Rules of engagement are important. So also, as far as hazing is concerned, a lot of armies did this. Before World War II, the Japanese army used to just beat the heck out of people. It produced a really obedient force. We can't do that, and we don't want to do that. The Russian army beats up its recruits. It's just a matter of ritual. We always believe that the best way to train is to have positive motivation, help each soldier and Marine be all he can be. So we want tough training. We want productive training. We want great units. A lot of this rhetoric that came out struck me as sort of culture war stuff. And we don't need culture war stuff in the United States military. What we need is good, solid training. We need great guidance from the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the policymakers. And our military is lethal. It will fight and win.
What was the message that you took away about women in the military? This idea that there needs to be a top male standard. Was there a diminished standard for women? I mean, did they let women, not fly planes as well as men? Was there a secondary standard to which women were not held to as high of a standard as men?
Well, not for most of these skills. We've had women fighter pilots, and when I was in Kosovo, running that campaign in 1999, we had women fighter pilots, and they were excellent flying those F-15s. They had great hand-to-eye coordination. They had G tolerance. They knew their stuff. They were good. Yes, in the Army's revised physical fitness program, the Army Combat Fitness Test, there are different standards for different ages, different duty MOSs, and so forth.
So guys, at the end of the day, power doesn't rule America. The law does. The generals have made it clear they swore an oath to the Constitution, not to unlawful command. This isn't defiance, it's duty. The real question is, who is really protecting the people now? Well, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Do well to like, share, and of course, subscribe to keep the channel moving. Till next time.